fluffed up and looking pretty and not worrying about how they're going to eat or how they're going to get over or whatever. That world exists 20 minutes from Harlem, where there's a lot of garbage on the streets, where there's, kids playing in the streets that have a lot of broken glass and bottles. We're all in this together, There's a pile of shit that I'm looking at on a nice clean street, but that pile is still there, and that pile still stinks. Heroin is a way of dealing with the fact that those inequities exist.
If you've got money, you can buy heroin. There's no shortage of heroin in Harlem. I might add that you don't see 600 or 700 people standing.
Sterling Johnson is New York Special Prosecutor. His jurisdiction, narcotics law enforcement.
Inside, they're in abandoned buildings, they're in bars, they're in apartments, but you can get heroin as easy as you can get a package of cigarettes.
With public television, we're making a film about narcotics in New York City. You know anything about that?
Yeah, I'm pretty about that. Yeah.
Are you involved in that?
Yeah, I'm involved in it.
To what extent? How are you involved in that?
Well, I don't really want to get into that. You have to talk to my outside there. I don't want to get into that. I cannot get into that.
Are you doing a film about drugs?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So you just go around and ask informal questions. Like you asked this kid, why did he use drugs?
Yeah, right.
Well, why don't you find out where he got them from?
Where do you think he got them from?
They came from Asia somewhere, right?
How did they get here?
Huh?
How did they get right here?
Now, that's what you find out.
Well, I'm trying to.
You don't ask the kid nothing like that.
Do you know?
You don't ask no kid like
But
that.
do you know?
Hey, listen, I'm older than you, so you don't ask me no questions. Just present yourself right. Police department stand down here on the street.
What do you mean?
For nothing.
But what do you mean?
They got all of that drugs out of downtown and put it back in the street.
For nothing. They just...
What do you mean? Why did they use it? Find out why the police put it back in the street. Ask these kids why they use it.
This guy is saying that the police are putting drugs out on
They
the
put
street.
it back out here. Everybody know it. Don't ask these kids why did they use drugs. Why did the police put it back out here?
What do you mean they put it back out?
They did. It was down there. No. Don't tell me you don't know. I'm speaking for myself, man.
What about the police? Do they have any?
I'm telling you now. I'm on to these public officials. They got their hand in it, or it couldn't happen out here. Right? I don't mean that to speak
Why don't you, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is naive or something, but why don't you come together and make a
now, you think that people like us out here coming together to make a change? Let's be realistic about it. Do you think people like us could have anything to do with any kind of change out here?
It was clear to us on FYI that drug addicts and an illicit heroin business was clearly evident on major Harlem thoroughfares. We wanted to know what the police were doing about it all, so we paid a visit to police headquarters.
Precinct commanders do not like their uniformed officers to make low-level narcotics arrests when we're talking about a couple of joints of marijuana or some pills, because that police officer is then lost for the rest of his tour of duty, and he goes into an overtime phase when he has to take the prisoner to criminal court, where those cases are just not seriously treated by the courts, given the volume of other cases that they have. What we try to do is use our narcotics officers, who are specially trained to address these conditions, so that periodically you may see a uniformed officer ignoring what appears to be a low-level narcotics transaction. Part of the problem is that police officer has got to obey the rules of evidence. He's got to make an arrest where he can stand up in court and take the oath and swear that he had probable cause to believe that a narcotics transaction was going down. I think that we have made a dent in Harlem. For example, Operation Drug, which was put into place some 2 years ago in the 2-8 and the 3-2 precinct in Harlem, has made a substantial impact on street conditions up there. Now, it's never going to be perfect. New York City is never going to be perfect. What we have to do is do our best, consistent with the manpower we have. But we've made thousands of street arrests up there, and we've confiscated millions of dollars worth of contraband, narcotics and guns and other things. And we've seen a reduction in the amount of street crime in those two precincts in the last 2 years. But we've put a substantial amount of manpower in that.
Oh, we got to clean somewhere. breaking it up. Yeah, we got to break it up. I'm breaking it up. Hold up, Mike. You might raise the fuck, man.
Let's go.
They have about 7 barber shops in between here and 116th Street, and it's just 2 now. They all closed up because of the junkies robbing us and knocking us off, you know.
How often have you been robbed?
Well, there was a time when I was robbed like every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, month, until I finally took everything out of here. There was nothing here left. They even come here just to get the telephone. There was nothing else in here but the telephone.
Are you personally afraid?
I'm not really afraid because I know a lot of them. I've been here so long, and a lot of the folks that's doing these things, I gave some of them their first haircut. And they know me, and they holler bothering me directly, you know.
Many community leaders in Harlem are soured by what they interpret as the official line. Reverend Calvin Butts is pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church. What kind of rationale do law enforcement officials give you when you see that they're not doing as much as you think they could do?
Well, they seem to feel that they're doing all that they can do. Especially when you talk to the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration under the Department of Justice. Much of their effort, as far as I can understand, has been geared toward this country's relationship to other nations where a large part of the heroin traffic comes from. It's imported from Turkey or from Mexico. And they seem to be putting a lot of emphasis on putting their agents in these places, trying to break it there. But we haven't seen the results of it here, especially in the Harlem community, which is seen, I guess, and rightly so, as the drug capital of America. And here's something else that's very interesting. Now, I got this from our police commissioner here in the city of New York, and also from the Drug Enforcement Administration. An interesting statistic. I was told, and not only myself, but a group of concerned clergy from this community, a number of us, that if the Drug Enforcement Administration, or even, shall we say, the city of New York, had all the men that they needed in their various units, and all of the money that they needed to pay these men and to fund investigative kinds of procedures, that only 20% of drug traffic that comes into this city could be stopped. Now, what kind of thing is that to say? Or what does it say? It says that enforcement is just about powerless to do anything about the enormous drug problem that we have in this city.
Before Nelson Rockefeller left office as governor of New York State, he got the state legislature to pass drug abuse legislation that was the most draconian in America. Rockefeller's drug laws guaranteed mandatory long-term sentencing and eliminated plea bargaining. These tough measures were necessary, said the governor, to stamp out drug addiction forever. Today, critics of the legislation say the laws have proved to be a failure. Jeremiah McKenna is the general counsel for New York State Select Committee on Crime.
Before the Rockefeller drug laws, we had much tougher laws in New York State. Between 1960 and 1970, we increased the penalties for narcotics trafficking 3 times to the point where you could get a 20-year sentence for selling an ounce or more of a hard drug. The problem was the law was never being enforced. Everybody just plea bargained out from under those penalties. All that the Rockefeller drug law really did was say, no plea bargaining out. I mean, we did not, in fact, we lowered the penalty structure in the narcotics laws. And what we did was we made it binding on law enforcement that they enforced the law. That became the toughest drug law. And that's the irony of the Rockefeller drug law. Law enforcement could not live with a structure that made them do what the law said they were supposed to do.
One way adult drug dealers have avoided Rockefeller's tough drug laws is by turning over the street-selling side of the heroin business to juveniles under 18, who may not be liable to the long-term sentences meted out to adult narcotics offenders. We talked to a former juvenile drug dealer. Preferring to remain unidentified, he granted us an interview in a Midtown hotel.
How young are some of the people that we're talking about?
13, 14, 15. Just keep going.
At that age?
Some is, about 11, you can say the youngest, maybe. Basically 13, 14, junior high school.
Junior high school kids are dealing drugs. What can a kid in that business earn, say, a week, a year?
Well, it depends, man. They can earn from, the less they earn is like $300 a day. They sell narcotics. So $300 a day is more than their parents make a week.
Do they ever think about what happens to the people that they're selling junk to?
Not at all.
Why not?
Why should they think about it? It's not really the people from out the neighborhood. People from other neighborhoods, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, wherever.
Come there.
Come to the spot that's got the best drug.
Critics of narcotics law enforcement policies find it difficult not to believe that despite the voting power blacks so clearly evidenced to elect President Carter, these same blacks are now being written off as casualties in the decline of the great American cities. And, apart from increased federal assistance in drug abuse law enforcement, most recommendations we were given seemed hardly fulfilling.
If you're talking about the enforcement effort against the drug problem, against those who sell it, those who import it, those who profit by it, we've lost that. That's out. Simplistically, to legalize the use of heroin under controlled circumstances, similar to that they've used in England, probably based on our own experience and our own type of population, and to use this to cut the underpinnings from this tremendous illegal population, illegal business that's dealing with this. You take the profit out of this. When you take the profit out of this, also you take the desirability out of this.
I think then you're writing off a generation when you allow free distribution of heroin. It has not worked in any country it's been tried in, as far as I know. And it seems to be the route we always go. When we can't enforce the law against them, we then give them the market by legalizing, and that's not the answer.
We ought to put more political pressure via our State Department on those nations where we know large quantities of drugs are coming from. That's number one. Number two, I think that the federal government ought to take a more active role in enforcement on local and state levels in terms of making sure that those agencies really harass, move out, do whatever is necessary, short of the erosion of civil rights, to push drug traffic out of our country altogether.
I think it's a cop-out. They've already agreed that they can't handle the problem. It's racist in some nature, where people just believe that drug addiction is confined to the black and brown communities, and we know that this epidemic has spread even outside of the economic status of the poor and going into the middle class and the wealthy as it relates to cocaine. Where do you cut it off if you want to make it legal? I'll show you what can happen if you do make it legal. What age is it that we should be legally allowed to dispense drugs to an 18-year-old, 16, 15-year-old addict? Or more importantly, when you come from a high unemployment area, where you find deteriorating houses, where you find really a lack of hope, and the older brother is coping with his problems, going to the local Fed center to get his high. How does he explain this to his younger brothers and sisters that want out just as badly? And so I assume the proponents would say, well, you have to be addicted in order to get it. We're not going to create addicts. So what's the big deal about going into the street, into the illicit market and getting addicted, saying, now I'm ready for my federal take? No, it seems to me that if we're prepared to give up people, it's just like if we have malnutrition, you say, well, don't give them anything, just leave it alone, the problem would go away. No, it's going to spread, and it's going to spread the same way that methadone has spread.
This grim view of drug enforcement in New York City is shared by some federal officials who are calling the war against narcotics America's new Vietnam, a no-win struggle that pits thousands of federal agents armed with the latest in secret technology against a sophisticated guerrilla drug trade.
And despite a few well-publicized arrests, law enforcement has lost the heroin war in Harlem. The border war to intercept the flow of heroin isn't doing much better, it seems. Drug enforcement officials are now getting bogged down pursuing their lowest priority, marijuana. These are captured enemy vessels, battered South American fishing trawlers, and these are the prisoners of the drug war. Colombian sailors paid well by their standards to haul dope to the American drug market. This is what the drug war is all about. Rich Colombian marijuana. It makes some of the best reefers money can buy. These particular vessels, the Santa Magdalena and the Miss Carroll, were seized by the United States Coast Guard in late October after they appeared to be drifting aimlessly off the Florida coast.
She was up in position outside of normal shipping lane. She was 70 miles east of West Palm, heading in a westerly direction toward the U.S. They stated they were bound from Venezuela to Mexico. I'm not sure exactly why they were 70 miles east of West Palm, but other than that, that's the only explanation I had.
A Coast Guard boarding party found what it suspected it would find: Colombian marijuana, tons of it, packed in cardboard television boxes. This successful bust netted nearly 40 tons of contraband and showed how well the half-dozen federal agencies thrown into the drug war have learned to cooperate. For example, in this case, the Coast Guard spotted the vessels, the State Department got approval from Venezuela to board them, the U.S. Customs Service took possession of the ships and the marijuana, most of which is burned in state incinerators. The Immigration and Naturalization Service took the crew into custody, and the Drug Enforcement Administration interrogated the crew and searched the vessel for evidence for its investigative files. Although this multi-agency battle plan regularly proves successful in the skirmishes, the net result shows the government is really losing the war.
Have you run into any of these people before? Are they repeaters in any way?
There's a couple of them that look mighty familiar.
In fact, 7 of the 9 crewmen of the Santa Magdalena had been apprehended the month before in a similar smuggling attempt. Some of the crew were on their 3rd mission, and because they're not U.S. citizens, they'll merely be sent home at taxpayers' expense. A one-way plane ride to Colombia costs $192. Federal agents say they expect to see them again in this lucrative revolving door drug trade. Federal and local agents simply cannot stop the drug flow in the Southeast, where the dollar volume of drug smuggling has exceeded tourism as Florida's biggest industry. A congressional committee has even sought to have South Florida declared a disaster area because it is now inundated with 80% of the nation's marijuana traffic and 50% of the cocaine traffic. The U.S. Customs Service and the Coast Guard monitor 1,200 miles of accessible coast and 5,000 miles of navigable waters in their search for drugs. Ed Lowry, a helicopter pilot for the Customs Service, says the drug war is as futile as Prohibition was 45 years ago.
This is thoroughly typical of simply literally hundreds of points where a contraband can enter. The water is fairly deep. It has access to motor vehicles. It has in fact been used for this particular thing many, many times. I've all personal experience know some 20 or 30 tons come in this particular area right here. Very, very popular area. Seems to remain so with the violators. As you see, it has beautiful access to heavy vehicles. Boats can be put in the water in this particular area. Everything that a smuggler will ask for. How can you possibly guard a coast that's so thoroughly open?
Another battlefront is the desert border from El Paso to San Diego. It stretches for 700 miles with nothing but a few strands of barbed wire and some fence posts separating the two countries. Footprints and tire tracks in the drifting sand are the only evidence the smugglers leave. Just outside of El Paso to the southeast, only the dry Rio Grande riverbed and an irrigation canal separate Texas and Mexico. Illegal aliens, still referred to here as wetbacks, hardly get their feet damp crossing this open, unfortified border. Hundreds of aliens cross into the United States each day. 36 million people and 12.5 million cars came through El Paso ports of entry last year. Countless more cross between these legal points to work or shop. Smugglers bring untold amounts of contraband drugs across this border daily. This year alone, agents were able to seize 5 tons of marijuana, 12 pounds of cocaine, and 24 pounds of heroin. The contraband drugs are brought in by mules, people hired by drug dealers to shuttle drugs across the border. Hank Washington is the special agent in charge of the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration's El Paso office. A narcotics agent for more than 20 years, Washington says the situation is hopeless.
They can cross just about anywhere they want to. We don't have enough manpower. Even if you had 10,000 men, I don't think, and lined up along the river, I don't think you could stop it. They'll hire somebody to carry it across. They'll either body pack it in a vehicle. They'll walk across the river with it. They'll put it in a spare tire of a vehicle. So many places, so many ways they can do it. Our indication is that most of it comes right through that bridge there. That's the hard narcotics, the heroin and the cocaine. That's what we are finding. Have you seen the bridge, have you? You seen the traffic there? If you take a look at it, as you'll see, it's an impossibility. You can't search everybody. You'd have traffic stacked up for 15 miles, and you just can't do it.
The war room for the nation's battle against drugs is here in an unmarked building near an industrial park in El Paso. It's called the El Paso Intelligence Center. The acronym is EPIC.
I have a positive code 112.
Representatives of 6 federal agencies, the Coast Guard, the Customs Service, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms cooperate in a venture to store and retrieve information on the people, planes, boats, and automobiles involved in the nation's drug traffic. EPIC houses the top secret computers and communications equipment the various federal agencies have assembled in their multifaceted battle plan.
Epic, this is center field. Request records check on the following vessel. The vessel is named Black Coral, 150-foot freighter. Black Hull, white.
Usually an agent calls in querying for information, and our response time is usually about 20 minutes. The information that he requests then obviously is added into our database to be made available to somebody else who calls. What we call a hit is on a query. Usually 30% of the time we are able to tell the querying officer something about the individual vessel, aircraft that he wants to know.
Be advised, the vessel is armed and dangerous. I repeat, armed and dangerous.
20 minutes retrieval time may not be long if you're staked out in an automobile or trailing a ship, but customs pilots who intercept most of the small plane drug traffic need to make an instantaneous identification, since experienced smuggler pilots have learned how to quickly fade from view. The air war waged primarily by customs pilots is conducted with the same daring and camaraderie that characterized the World War I flying aces.
After they're identified, we realize it's somebody we want to stay with, and we'd stay in his blind spot, off to the side and shortly to the rear, sort of a military formation spot.
This kind of surveillance is usually done at night, with both smuggler and narcotics enforcement officer flying without lights. The glow of the smuggler's tailpipes is the customs pilot's only guide. Computers in the United States Customs Service are always online. In a little interagency rivalry, customs people told us their own computer is better than Epic's. The names of United States citizens and foreign visitors entering the country are typed immediately into the customs data bank. If a name is flagged, inspectors may make a more thorough search of baggage and ask more questions. They also rely on intuition.
It's more or less a sixth sense whether you really want to go into the luggage that deeply or whether you believe the person or not. I'm really getting a feel of the passenger because I'm looking at his actions or reactions to, what bag I touch. I'm asking him questions all the time to see what his responses are, and that's where I get my feel. That's where the sixth sense comes from.
And a couple of bags of white powder always create a stir.
Oh, we might have something here, gentlemen.
Even if it's only powdered milk.
If this was anything, this would have turned blue.
It's not anything, so we're going to return it back to the passenger.
Customs officials in Miami say most of the people they apprehend are novices or small-time marijuana or cocaine traffickers. They told us the professionals were still using the large numbers of international travelers as a screen to sneak through. The stepped-up cocaine trade provides other headaches for Customs. The drug is so compact it can be hidden away on freighters, later to be picked up by small boats or carried ashore by crewmen going on liberty. Cocaine has also been mixed with a plaster of Paris substance and molded into pottery. Upon delivery, the cocaine in the pottery is reduced to powder form. Cargo shipments are tested randomly, but again, the sheer volume of imports dictates that most of the contraband just passes through. The trophies of yachts and airplanes seized by Customs attest to the fact that smugglers spare no expense to transport their contraband. Customs officials say their greatest frustration is dealing with the sophisticated equipment the smugglers acquire. Even a rusty old tub like the Santa Magdalena had the best radar and radio equipment, while Customs officials say it takes an act of Congress for them to buy a new airplane. Thus, Customs often appropriates some of the better seized vessels for its own use. Customs and the Coast Guard maintain a visible frontline surveillance in the drug conflict. The Drug Enforcement Administration performs much of its field work undercover. In 1977, the agency spent nearly $5 million for clandestine drug purchases. The DEA arranged for us to film what they call a flash.
This is a flash film consisting of about $70,000. This is very typical in a narcotics transaction, whether it be done by the government or by just crooks by themselves. Usually they want to see money before they produce their narcotics. A little while ago, this was shown to a crook here in the city, and the transaction is pending in the near future. He's selling marijuana. I'm negotiating for half a ton. He just didn't count. He just looked in the bag and he closed it, and he was satisfied that I did have the money to purchase the narcotics he was selling. I've been doing it for 12 years now. You never really get used to it. You always have butterflies in your stomach to a certain extent. You don't know who the person might be that might draw a gun on you. I've had a few shootouts, but you can never tell when it might happen again.
3 days later, the suspect, a known drug trafficker with a previous record, was arrested with 5 co-defendants. 1,200 pounds of marijuana was seized. Although the job can be aggravating, many of the enforcement officials we spoke to admitted they enjoyed the dangerous game of good guys versus bad guys. And if one is a Customs patrol officer, one could get paid between $18,000 and $26,000 a year to spend one's days and nights on a boat or an airplane.
You enjoy doing this? Certainly. It's a lot more fun than flying for the airlines.
Do you like your work? If I didn't, I must be a fool. I've been here long enough.
What about your job makes you angry?
Everything. No sentences of drug pushers. Small sentences, drug pushers. U.S. attorneys don't have enough people to prosecute. We have a tendency to do the plea bargain, which is a perfectly legal and a perfectly accepted thing. Sometimes we don't like it, but it's a necessary thing. They have to do it. I don't like all the paperwork we're burdened with. Any agent will tell you that. That's the first thing he'll tell you. There's a lot of things about this job that's frustrating. It's a very, very good job.
You wouldn't trade it?
Negative. Never. Sure wouldn't.
The war against drugs is mostly a war against marijuana. 7 out of every 10 drug arrests are for pot, the overwhelming majority for simple possession.
The government says that 36 million Americans have smoked marijuana, and 10 states have decriminalized reefer to some extent. But law enforcement agents busted more people than ever last year, 450,000 of them.
Neither the FBI nor the DEA could tell us how much money it costs to bust marijuana users. But official studies in California and Illinois project that it's about $600 million a year.
This is marijuana, the weed that all the fuss is about. Marijuana has been around for a long time. For thousands of years, writers have praised its medicinal values and condemned its power to disorient the mind. But for the most part, people have cultivated marijuana for the hemp fiber in its stalks and the oil in its seeds. During the 19th century, American doctors prescribed a tincture of marijuana for a variety of ailments, for corns, bronchitis, relief from the pangs of childbirth, and acute depression. The use of marijuana for medicinal purposes effectively ended in 1937. And in 1970, the U.S. government ranked marijuana with heroin as a drug that has no acceptable medical use. After 2 decades of widespread recreational use, today researchers once again are testing its medicinal values. The 5 acres of marijuana growing behind this fence in Mississippi are the property of the U.S. government. To get this legal marijuana, researchers have to plow through the bureaucracies of 3 federal agencies. And once they get it, the researchers have to maintain elaborate security precautions in order to keep it. This is a U.S. government marijuana cigarette. The man smoking it is unique. Bob Randall smokes 70 U.S. government joints a week. He's smoking one of them now. The story of how Bob Randall came to get the government marijuana goes back to 1973. Randall, a glaucoma victim, accidentally discovered that marijuana helped relieve the symptoms of his glaucoma.
For instance, I would look at a street light, and around it would be this tricolored halo, very much like in a religious theme. That occurred one evening in the fall of 1973. I happened to have marijuana at the time. I smoked 2 joints, and within 45 minutes, the halos were gone. It was an immediate, overwhelming impression that marijuana had reduced the pressure in my eye significantly.
Randall began to smoke marijuana regularly and illegally. He grew the marijuana out here on the sun deck of his Washington home until the summer of 1975.
I was arrested in August of 1975 out here on this sun deck. I had 4 marijuana plants which I was growing. I wasn't actually home at the time, so the plants were arrested and the police left a search warrant on my kitchen table. I was actually arrested 3 or 4 days later when I was taken, fingerprinted, mugged, and arraigned. I was found not guilty by reason of medical necessity. The judge ruled that my use of marijuana was reasonable and the laws preventing me from using marijuana were irrational.
After the trial, the government found Randall a university research project that provided him with marijuana. But when the project ended in January of 1978, his supply of legal marijuana was cut off.
In an attempt to regain access to marijuana through the federal government, I secured counsel. My lawyers attempted on a number of occasions to privately go to the government and seek a solution. The government was, in essence, stonewalling it. A number of people within the federal government suggested that I go out on the street and meet my medical needs. I'm not sure that that's very wise advice for a person who needs medical help. Just go out on the streets and get your medical help. Certainly you wouldn't ask somebody who had a cardiac condition to go out in the streets and get their medicine on the streets. Certainly you wouldn't ask a diabetic to go out and get his insulin off the streets. There are things about the streets that are dangerous.
Randall filed suit against the U.S. government. The Justice Department settled out of court. Today, the government supplies Randall with marijuana through a written order from his private doctor.
I like that.
He gets it free. In the streets, the same amount of marijuana would cost him about $100 a week.
A few people ahead of you, so be about 5 minutes or so. The marijuana is supplied to me as any other drug would be supplied to me. I go to my doctor's. He takes out his prescription pad. He fills out a prescription for marijuana. I take it to a government pharmacy here in Washington, and I'm supplied with it once a week. Mr. Randall? Okay, 70. And see you in 1 week. Sounds good. Have a good day. Okay, thank you. I think the sad thing is that after 2 years, I am the only one who's getting it legally. A lot of people are being forced to get it illegally, and other people are just doing without. There are a lot of people who have glaucoma who could be helped. There are a lot of people who have cancer undergoing chemotherapy who could obviously benefit.
Claims about the medical value of marijuana are increasing. Some of the most dramatic testimonials come from cancer victims, like Harriet Gluck, who lives on Long Island.
I'm 63. I spent 42 years of my life in the New York City school system. I look forward to retirement eagerly. In May of 76, a very routine checkup visit to a dermatologist for my husband who had had a skin growth removed. I turned to the doctor and said, take a look at this mole on my leg. It looks very peculiar. And he said, do you have a surgeon? And then it was like the whole world collapsed on me.
The surgeon diagnosed cancer, but despite 2 operations, Harriet Gluck's cancer spread. Her doctors recommended chemotherapy treatments.
The first session was in the hospital, and these 2 angels of mercy came in with this long hypodermic needle, and the next thing I knew, I was in for a vomiting session that lasted about 8 hours. It's, frankly, while going through some of this, I would say to the children, I'm never going back again. I would rather die than go for another injection. The experience was an excruciating one.
There had been a few articles in Newsday, which is the paper in this area, and both the family had read them and some friends.
Mrs. Gluck's children read that marijuana might help their mother. They decided to find some for her through friends.
From that point on, we knew we had to try something, and since it seemed to be working in some cases, we knew we had to do it.
That was all he would tell me.
But when Mrs. Gluck asked her cancer specialist about marijuana, he was evasive.
Well, I was a little bit upset at the time because I truly felt that if the doctors knew of the so many patients who were using the marijuana and they knew it had a beneficial effect, they ought to be in a position where they could pass this information along. The idea of having to stumble in the dark and seek out my own information, I would feel sorry for a person who didn't have someone like my 3 children to turn to help them out. I would feel totally helpless. I think I would be completely inhibited by the fact that it was illegal, and would not attempt to go through the devious channels. I wouldn't even know what devious channel to go through. I guess I'm a very naive babe in the woods in that respect.
Do you think it ought to be legalized?
For medicinal purposes, absolutely. There's no question in my mind. No question at all. There's no reason why the doctor can't write a prescription and have it dispensed by the pharmacist over the counter just as any other drug is.
Dr. Lester Grinspoon, a psychiatrist on the faculty of Harvard Medical School, explained that conventional anti-nauseants sometimes don't help the chemotherapy patient.
The usual kinds of treatments of nausea and vomiting, for example, compazine, are often just not at all effective, whereas marijuana is very often quite dramatically effective.
Is this still speculative, or do we know enough now to prescribe the use of marijuana in some of these instances?
Well, I think that we know enough about it to prescribe it.
Other doctors have said that to me privately, but very few of them will say that publicly. Why is that?
Well, I think doctors, like everybody else in this country, were so brainwashed about the substance. When I started to do my work on which led to the book Marijuana Reconsidered, I had much of the same view. It took a couple of years of hard work to disabuse myself of some of these views.
Some chemotherapy patients aren't waiting for attitudes and laws to change. Richard Sandel is smoking marijuana illegally to combat the nausea of his chemotherapy treatments. The illegality is especially troubling to Sandel because he's the director of a drug abuse program.
Next time
But conventional anti-nauseants just don't help him.
Although I was taking compazine at the time, that's the time when the 7.5 hours of throwing up, I mean, my body was sore for a week. From that point on, I have smoked marijuana every time I have gotten chemotherapy because it does work. I mean, I know people that I've talked to who have chemotherapy who are sick for a week and can't eat for most of that time. Every time they eat, they'll throw up. I have not had that happen to me at all. And most of that, I think, is because of the marijuana.
In September, Sandel filed suit against the federal government. He wants to get his marijuana legally, just like Bob Randall.
I don't know why this marijuana thing is such a boogeyman. I mean, the side effects of marijuana are a hell of a lot less than the side effects of my chemotherapy, and nobody's hesitating about giving me chemotherapy. So I just don't understand it. People get irrational with marijuana.
Under pressure, the federal government decided to form an interagency committee on new therapies for pain, in part to examine the medical uses of marijuana. Dr. Seymour Perry of the National Institute of Health is the committee chairman. He urges caution.
Well, you realize before a drug can be recommended for, any drug can be recommended for use by the physician, there needs to be good evidence. Good evidence meaning obtained on the basis of a well-designed clinical trials. There have been a large number of studies and anecdotal reports of the value of marijuana or marijuana derivatives in several different conditions. But that sort of evidence is not sufficient to warrant the introduction of a drug into medical practice.
I'm young. I have the capability, at least, of going into the street if the situation gets really serious and the government won't meet my needs. But I have had to watch people in their 60s go blind because they could not gain access to legal stocks and didn't know where to go to get it illegally.
How were you able to obtain the marijuana?
Same way everybody else does, from the street, which is crazy. Really crazy.
I have a very firm conviction that it's being used medicinally, it's being used to help me, it's being used to alleviate my distress. And if the government sees clear to prosecute me as an offender, then I'm willing to make myself a test case.
We talked to experts in the 3 federal agencies that must approve marijuana research projects. Dr. Edward Tokus of the Food and Drug Administration warned that testimonials are no substitute for thorough scientific investigation. Dr. Tokus said marijuana needs a lot more study before it can be used medicinally. Dr. Kars Besteman of the National Institute of Drug Abuse advised against taking any drugs except under a doctor's supervision. And all the federal officials stressed that marijuana is still illegal.
4 states have recently passed laws to facilitate the therapeutic use of marijuana, but laws depend on legal supplies from the United States government, and thus far, not a single marijuana cigarette has been made available to any state. With us on FYI is Peter Benzinger, the administrator of the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration. Mr. Benzinger, is there anything that your agency could do to relax the federal restrictions around the medicinal use of marijuana?
Basically, the availability of any controlled substance, and one that is illegal, such as marijuana, is controlled by HEW. And the availability to an individual who has a medical prescription approved by HEW would be determined by that agency.
Would increased medicinal use create any unusual law enforcement problems for you?
I don't think so, under properly controlled regulations. And I think you should know that the Drug Enforcement Administration and the Department of Justice have no problems with medically approved and sanctioned use of substances like marijuana.
How do you respond, Mr. Benzinger, when communities like, people in communities like the ones we saw in Harlem say that enforcement has lost the heroin war?
Well, I think in many respects we've made problems of our own making in our criminal justice system. I'm reminded all too often that we have 2,500 fugitives that have been arrested, indicted by the Drug Enforcement Administration agents. In fact, more fugitives than we have agents, who, because of the vast rewards, choose not to reappear in court and skip. We do have, though, some encouraging signs, and that's the major reduction in the number of overdose deaths from heroin that have reduced from 150 a month 2 years ago to less than 40 a month. Reduction in purity and a reduction in overall quantities in the United States. 2 tons less heroin is in this country now than was the case several years ago.
But when you say that, is that a function of enforcement, or is that not just a function of the weakness in the supply or some other?
I think the key rests in stopping narcotics at the source. And the specific reduction in availability is traceable directly to the enforcement program in Mexico, which the government of Mexico has embarked upon and destroyed the opium poppies before they could be harvested and transformed in laboratory process into morphine base and then heroin. The availability of heroin continues to exist, but the national crime statistics are down, the purity is down, the fatalities are down, the injuries are down from 4,000 every 3 months to 2,000. So there is some encouraging signs. And I think we need to also look to the new legislation President Carter approved, which enables our agency to go after the money and to seize the assets of these major criminal organizations, the fruit of the crime. Over the years, we've arrested people and seized drugs with varying degrees of success. Going after the money and seizing the real estate and the businesses and the cash will put a bigger dent in the heroin traffickers in Harlem and other major cities than almost anything else we could do.
Therefore, Mr. Benzinger, in a word and briefly, what's your prognosis?
I think in terms of heroin, we're seeing continued reduction in availability. In terms of the other drug substances, we are not seeing the same severity of punishment. Cocaine and marijuana still tend to be generally available throughout the United States.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, Mr. Benzinger. For Chris Koch and Linda Shan, who is on assignment, and for FYI, I'm Tony Batten. See you.
I got one more for you guys. How y'all doing? The war on us is like crazy. The stuff that we, we've been through. We such a resilient people. When I say we are like, we're great. That's all I can say. We have a history of going through so many different wars against us and crimes and different things against us. And man, we can pull through, find a way, make it, so on and so forth. Either way, we always are resilient. We are so strong. We so awesome. I just love our people. Even the negative things that they try to say about us, so on and so forth, those things can't be equivalent to how powerful and great we are, because we like everything. Let's get into this next one real quick. This the hometown right here. I don't care how bad they talk about this place. This place is everything. And I had a lot of horrible things there. A lot of bad things happened there, but also a lot of great things. It's a beautiful, awesome city. So yeah, let's get into it.
Immediately afterwards, a heavy and dark cloud of ash started spreading toward the lake.
It's been over 20 years since Chicago began to rewrite a chapter of its own story. A story tucked away in the shadows of its famous skyline. Closing an era shrouded in an ambiguous past. One that, if not remembered, will soon be forgotten. This story's legacy, the violence and poverty that plague Chicago's hyper-segregated communities.
Let me pause this for a second.
But what is known about the systems that created them?
I was muted, but I wasn't.
The law.
Okay, and I'm going to rewind this because I was talking, and let me just say. Okay, the brother, Dre High's brother. We played your song earlier. I played it a couple of times. It was like awesome. I love it. Shout out to you for that fire, that heat that you dropped. Just wanted to say that. Everybody in the chat, shout them out. If you guys heard that earlier, that was a fire jam. The brother dropped some knowledge. All right, let's go.
One more. 3, 2, 1. Immediately afterwards, a heavy dust. 3, 2, 1. Immediately afterwards, a heavy and dark cloud of ash started spreading toward the lake.
It's been over 20 years since Chicago began to rewrite a chapter of its own story. A story tucked away in the shadows of its famous skyline. Closing an era shrouded in an ambiguous past. One that, if not remembered, will soon be forgotten. This story's legacy, the violence and poverty that plague Chicago's hyper-segregated communities. But what is known about the systems that created them? The laws that isolated them, and the policies that abandoned them? And how does a city heal from decades of heartbreaking loss? At the crossroad of a nation, this is Chicago's story.
3, 2, 1. Boom!
72 murders for the month.
3 days, 68 people were shot.
What the hell is going on in Chicago? Chicago on pace for 700.
Man was shot live on Facebook.
Deadly gun violence is surging in Chicago once again.
Horrific weekend in Chicago.
More needs to be
More
done.
than 3,000 people have been shot in Chicago.
Homicide is related to the desperation of young men, and particularly black young men in the United States. And that's what we're seeing in Chicago.
When people think of PTSD as being what happens to people who've been in combat,
the choices are very limited. What I got to lose? My life?
You break down a city, it's like a tale of two cities. If you are downtown Chicago, you almost feel untouchable. Then you go south.
You go out to some of the neighborhoods, they just are starved for resources and investment.
That's abandonment. That's just systematic destruction.
It's that pot that's boiling, the stuff that starts spilling out, or we could turn the fire down.
You hear people, they present the problem, and they say, yo, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. Okay, you're woke, you know the problem. What is the solution?
Get your presidential t-shirts, guys. Family of the United States of America.
It's been over a decade since the world's eyes were unmistakably fixed on Grant Park in Chicago. The night the nation elected its first African-American president, Barack Obama. The pride of a city couldn't have been greater. Chicago felt together, in unison with a renewed optimism for the future. Especially me. I grew up right around Argyle Gardens, one of Chicago's most desolate public housing projects. Home to toxic landfills and abandoned industrial plants, the Gardens, where Barack Obama began his career as a community organizer. When I was a kid, you couldn't have felt further from the luxury of the Chicago Loop growing up. I was one of the lucky ones who made it out. Overcoming the odds to become a spoken word artist and a Grammy-winning producer. I grew up seeing the bloodshed of the gang wars in the 90s. And it was at this moment
America is a place where all things are possible. Change has come to America.
that I thought we had reached a new day for America, for Chicago. But the feeling didn't seem to last forever. By the end of President Obama's second term, the world's eyes were once again focused on Chicago. This time, for all the wrong reasons. Murder was running through Chicago faster than the Chicagoans running from it. Blood was flowing through our streets. What went so wrong in this city to make it the case study for murder and violence? Or is Chicago just a scapegoat for a violent nation?
That
And
high
a testament
frequency
for things to
beam.
come. Truth be told, Chicago ranks just 9th in murders per capita and 24th for violent crimes. But in the court of public opinion, Chicago is an active war zone. Even as mass shootings multiply and urban violence escalates coast to coast. But for Chicagoans, we recognize the issue. We know it's up to us to fix it because no one else will.
Don't shoot! On Monday, we were told we were the deadliest month of August, deadliest month in 20 years. On Tuesday, we were told Chicago has more murders than New York and Los Angeles together.
Saw pictures of people have been killed. One was my son. Right there with the red cap on?
Yeah.
Red shirt, that's my son. That's Jarvis, the one I told you about. So you know.
It has happened again. This latest victim, a 6-year-old girl.
Tonight, we're learning more about a 6-year-old girl who was shot while playing outside on this hot summer day.
When I turn her head, it's just leaking blood. I just really want us to live in peace.
Sometimes the only way people can cope is just to try not to cope, not even to deal with it, ignore it like it's not happening because it becomes too much. And people are afraid. When a 6-year-old girl from my school says to me, Father Mike, will you pray for me? I said, what am I going to pray for? She said, that I'm alive at the end of the summer. That a child has to even think like that at 6, they deserve their future.
It's real out here.
They have a right to grow up.
I beat that shit. I beat the odds.
It's going back. Got a little afro right there.
What do you want to do when you grow up?
A doctor and police.
Oh, so she's going to have 2 jobs. She's going to be a police officer and a doctor, huh?
Yep.
You're going to be making people feel good and taking the crime off the streets at the same time. That's what I'm talking about, my baby. What's our phrase? What you want people to do? What you want these men to do outside?
Put the guns down. Put the guns down.
We gonna fight, shoot, and kill over blocks that have been abandoned and neglected. Some blocks that look like third world countries, and we're gonna fight over a block that other people don't give a damn about. How stupid is that?
We ain't got to put them down. We got to handle them the correct way, the proper way.
Development, bring some jobs, bring some hope, bring some possibility back to our community. You can't just say stop the violence. Give me a job. Give me a way out. Give me an opportunity. This fight is in our hands.
How did it end up like this? So violent. So hopeless for so many. To truly find the answers, we have to go back to the beginning.
Most of the adults were born in rural areas of the South. They came to Chicago looking for a better way of life. They came to the south side of the city because they found that this was a place where Negroes were permitted to live. About all that they brought with them were their hopes and their dreams.
They knew if they could make it to Chicago from Mississippi, from Alabama, from Arkansas, there was work here. Chicago was a gold mine if you lived in the South.
Chicago was the place where people came so they could build their families and build their futures.
And you began to work at the steel mill. People worked at the stockyard.
You could be an accountant in the North. You could work for an insurance company in the North. You could be a policeman in the North.
There was harmony, cohesiveness, and happiness
because people fled the South were looking to the future.
There was finally a light at the end of the tunnel for Southern blacks and a chance to live the American dream of the North. But that light will prove to be nothing more than a mirage.
Sometimes we talk about this era as if it was all wonderful.
When I came to Chicago, I just thought I was going to something, heaven, I guess. But when I got here, I found out that it was.
Segregation was part of the culture of the North.
The hope I really had when I come here to do better. But after I got here and started work, looked like to me I did worse.
This is when the city of Chicago, with help from the private industry, real estate, and banks, decided, well, we don't want Black people living with white people. And that began a host of policies that I call the Jim Crow North.
The agreement was called restrictive covenants.
Black people come from the South, they definitely can't live with us. So where do we live? Pushed to the worst neighborhoods. We're pushed to slums that others have moved out from.
Racism is structured into housing. That is, when people who are from a different background move in large numbers, you just restrict them to certain areas.
We were assigned where to live. On the one hand was the joy of our living together, free of the burdens of the South. But then we were trapped and could not grow, could not get out.
The concentration of people was 4 times that of adjacent white communities. The Black Belt, and gradually, block by block by block.
The Black Belt just kept bursting by the seams because Black people couldn't live anywhere else.
We have looked forward to our coming to Chicago with great and eager anticipation. We are here to study the conditions as they relate themselves in housing.
Dr. Martin Luther King knew that Chicago was really notorious at this time for being a difficult place for African Americans to come and find good, fair housing at decent prices.
But I can say that I have never seen, even in Mississippi and Alabama, mobs as hostile and as hate-filled as I've seen here in Chicago.
I was there and I saw what can happen to human beings if they're excluded from the main source of opportunity.
It couldn't get much worse, so if it did, I wouldn't be living at all.
Chicago is one of the most segregated cities on earth.
It's segregated by class as well as race. And so it's almost tribal.
I find that people of all races seem to think that this is something that just naturally happened. Oh, well, I just live around people who are like me.
I grew up in an all-Black community. The only time I ever saw anybody that wasn't Black is when I went to go buy food. I had to buy that from the Arabs. If I was being detained by the police, a lot of times it might have been a white officer. But just random white people just in your hood, they was never there. You feel like, man, it has to be some sort of plan or something behind that to make it go down like that. And here we are living in it today.
Most people on the North Side, the reason they don't know anything about the South Side is because they've never been to the South Side, ever. So it's easy to say, I don't worry about that. That's not in my backyard. You see what's happening on the news. Boy shot, girl shot, kid shot on a playground. And you say to yourself, I have no idea what's going on.
To truly understand the plight of Chicago into the city that you see today, we have to go back again to the city fathers who saw the blighted slums as eyesores instead of communities, and its residents as second-class citizens. Fixing the problem while maintaining segregation would prove to be the point of no return.
Godfather, you gonna get
Today, the endless plain is gone. We must build a new city on top of the old. Today, we have and have to have a comprehensive plan for the city of Chicago, taking into account the needs of all the people to have a decent place to live.
Public housing starts in the New Deal as a response to the poverty conditions and also slum conditions that existed in many cities. The idea was to clear the slums, build new housing, and this will make better citizens. And this is the kind of government flow of money from Washington that Mayor Richard J. Daley was very interested in bringing to Chicago.
This project represents the future of a great city.
How are we going to do this? Well, it's cheaper to build up. We're going to build up. We build high rises.
Federal government said it's high rises or yet nothing. Everybody took the high rise across the country.
For most of us who are living in ghettos and moving into the projects was a chance to get stabilized and then to move into the mainstream of American housing and American life.
When folks first moved in public housing, it was the place to be. African Americans will tell you that, veterans will tell you that, and we talk about the 50s, 60s, and the 70s.
I think the buildings are nice, but it's just like taking one big slum and sit it in another slum because nothing has been changed.
So yeah, let's try that again. You wanted it simpler. Public housing failed in Chicago for a few very basic reasons.
They went up in waves across the country. Partnerships between Washington and local housing authorities. The government would pay to build public housing, and a local entity would manage the day-to-day operations and plan the construction. In this case, the Chicago Housing Authority, CHA. Chicago's plan was more ambitious than any in the country. A total of 29 public housing communities would grow up across Chicago in just a few decades. A mix of row houses, mid-rises, and high-rise buildings were scattered. And then there were the monsters. Cabrini Green on the city's north side, concentrating more than 15,000. Whoa! If Cabrini Green was the monster, well then Robert Taylor was the Goliath. 28 16-story buildings located directly on the raised South Side slums. One of a cluster of housing projects that spanned nearly 4 miles as far as the eye could see.
So those were 5 different public housing developments in this one corridor concentrated in the heart of the South Side of Chicago. That many buildings with that many poor people in one place. It decimated the South Side of Chicago.
The city planners had come too far to turn back now. The decisions to maintain segregation in Chicago would come at a price because there were massive holes in their master plan. But nobody said segregation would be easy, beginning with the basic function of paying for the exorbitant upkeep of the buildings themselves. The income to maintain the massive structures relied mostly on a scaled portion of tenant wages, and the bottom would soon fall out of urban industrialization and the funds to operate public housing, much like the jobs that had lured millions from the South, would all disappear too.
This building is through. I'm 33 years old. I've been here 33 years. The heating systems, it's not working.
Girl, this don't make no sense. They should at least have some heat.
Y'all seen the floods in the building, the water, the pipes, them busted and everything like that.
When I moved into public housing, there was rigorous background checks. There were social workers who checked in on you. They no longer did any of that. They simply took people, threw them in. They said, if you want to live in public housing, come on, go in.
The quality of life was hell on earth. You might go to sleep and it might be roaches crawling from up under your pillow. You may get on the elevator and the elevator smell like urine. You may be outside playing basketball, hooping, and somebody that you just passed the ball to might get shot in the head. I lost a good friend of mine. He was out just shooting jumpers and they came through and shot him 19 times, automatic.
The police always used to say they don't go into Cabrini until the shooting stops. You hear a lot of residents say they feared for their life because of the lack of protection.
Planners made a choice to build housing for large families, families with 5, 6, 7 children.
Originally, there were 7 persons to every unit. When you couple that with female-headed families and average incomes of $5,000,
they didn't think about how many kids they were putting in a building versus the number of adults.
Just masses and masses of children. If you could imagine a 16-story building pouring out children, and then the children deciding what they wanted to do, what was good, whether or not they wanted to fight, whether or not they wanted to steal.
You have to put all of this shift in public housing at the feet of public policy.
The government would not pay for a child who had a father living with that child.
Fathers of some children in this building found their families could be helped by the welfare department, but only if they left home or died.
The father leaves, all of a sudden the rent drops. Hey, that's a pretty good deal. It became a financial incentive for the father to move out.
My father could not live with us. And we had social workers come to our homes to find out if there were men's clothes or if we had a new television.
Jane, this is Miss Stewart.
Glad to know you, Mr. Stewart. How are you?
I'm here to help you find a place to move.
What would happen then is that you've got a lot of children now without adult supervision from men.
And the dropout rate in the schools began to increase dramatically. Many of the boys were put out of school and they were in the streets. They terrorized the community, this community and others.
Across America, public housing is in ruins, called a national disgrace.
Cabrini Green. To some folks, it has become a hell on earth.
Life at Robert Taylor is dominated by welfare, women, and children.
Either CHA is going to manage its real estate, or we should just declare openly that the gangs have control of our property and let them have it.
It's like some bad movie. I mean, is there something that can be done?
Right now, the only organized activity in public housing is the gang and the drug dealer.
Everyone has agreed on one single point. The place has to be changed.
Well, you see, it's poverty stricken. Basically, they need a lot of jobs over here.
Somehow you always make it full circle right back here.
I would like to see some jobs come to us where we all can make money, get off aid, and just live like we want to live. Because see, right now, we all struggling. We're struggling for money, food, and everything else.
5 years from now? I'm gonna tell you, I don't really know. Hope to still be living.
Reports from Chicago, where the U.S. government has just seized control of the local public housing authority.
Today's takeover in Chicago makes the federal government landlord of America's poorest, most crime-infested public housing projects.
In the end, these high-rise public housing developments were awful places to live. By any measure, high-rise public housing development should have been closed for housing code violations like any other slum building in the city. By the late 1990s, everybody realized this had been a mistake.
In big cities across America, the consensus is public housing doesn't work. And in Chicago, it's coming down. Chicago will destroy more public housing than any city in the country. The debate over what should replace them and who should live there has been fierce.
Maybe the thing that was most detrimental to this city was the federal government and the Chicago Housing Authority pouring folks out that they didn't prepare, that they had for generations.
Hundreds of gunshots are reported, more than a dozen killings in one weekend. Many of the victims are teenagers. New gang wars are breaking out in Chicago, and as the homicide rate is at a near record high.
Frustration over conditions in Chicago Housing Authority developments has reached a new high in Chicago.
Go, get out of here.
An upsurge in violence and the debate over how to combat it brought the Secretary of Housing to Chicago. After indicting Robert Taylor Holmes, he called conditions deplorable.
American women and children are living in a setting that is violent, and demeaning, and fearsome, and introduces their children to a world without hope.
What those conditions meant, said the mayor, is that public housing in Chicago has failed.
The bottom line is that high-rise public housing does not work. Isolating, as pointed out, low-income people in 10 or 20-story concrete boxes has failed.
So CHA Chairman Vince Lane pressed Cisneros for a loan of $1 billion to do what Lane says may be the only thing left to do.
Totally change public housing as we now know it.
There's a failure of the city, a failure of the housing authority, a failure of the federal government in Washington to allow conditions to spiral down to that level.
Once you withdrew maintenance, it was only a matter of time.
For years, community activists at Cabrini Green have been saying the city's ultimate plan was to move them out of these buildings and off this land because Cabrini is only minutes from downtown Chicago, making the land very valuable.
Public housing was located on some of the most desirable land in the city, the most valuable land.
Do CHA residents really want to move?
And so the people who lived in public housing said, we just want to stay here.
It's the American dream, a little house in the suburbs with a picket fence.
The American dream for me is to be left alone.
If you could live anywhere you wanted to, where would you live?
I stay over here. I've been raised up over here all my life. I'm comfortable over here.
We just prepared for the worst right now.
Okay. And it went down fast. Cities had erased high-rise public housing from their city plan.
The entire area will be transformed into a middle-class, white, yuppie style community. That's what is happening. That land is worth $1 billion if it's cleared.
There's a conspiracy theory that what's really going to happen is that everyone's going to be squeezed out. They will make way for the big buck developers. Is that going to happen?
No, it won't happen. And I'm committed to make sure that public housing residents are not displaced from their communities.
It's very difficult to maintain peace and tranquility in the midst of confusion.
You one of them because you wear a badge. They don't love you and they never will.
If we leave here, where are we going to go? If we leave here, where are we going to live?
There were 30,000 families living in public housing. Where were people going to go? Was there going to be a revolt? Could this be pulled off?
My primary concern is where's the next generation going to live? You think they're thinking about the American dream? What is the American dream these days?
The infamous era of high-rise public housing in Chicago and most of the country was over. A testament to public policy gone wrong. a failure on all levels of government. The design was flawed. The vision was short-sighted. The empathy was lost. But the root motivation of these massive warehouses for the poor was much more sinister.
When there were too many black people, they said, what are we going to do? Well, let's build these high rises, but we can't put them in the white areas. Let's rip down houses in the black community and house people within those neighborhoods. And all of those projects, with the exception of Cabrini, were built in all black neighborhoods, and Cabrini then became an all black neighborhood.
The reason that high-rise public housing was built in Chicago was an attempt by the city government to constrain the black population of the city in the smallest geographic area.
That's not a recipe for success. That's a blueprint for disaster.
It was too late. Those buildings were destined to go.
It's now been 2 decades since the first brick fell from the mortar of Chicago public housing. What followed was known as the Plan for Transformation.
Now we find ourselves in the 21st century. There's a whole lot of people in the United States who need stable housing that's affordable. Even the city of Chicago's estimates is that there's a lack of about 120,000 units of affordable housing.
Now you have taken away the housing, but you don't have anything to replace it. Instead, you have condominiums that are costing $1,800 for 1 bedroom and $2,000 for 2 bedrooms.
There are some neighborhoods in Chicago that are becoming unaffordable because rents are too high, but there are some neighborhoods in Chicago that are unaffordable because people don't make enough money.
Communities that are poor, people that are poor, are getting pushed into a smaller and smaller box as gentrification takes up more and more space.
And we sort of gave up on conventional public housing. We decided that a whole lot of public purposes should be privatized, infusing it with incentivizing the profit motive. In the public housing realm, we decided to turn it over to private developers. So the Section 8 programs came into existence. Tenants have vouchers where they can take those vouchers and have the rental assistants follow them to whatever landlord in whatever building they live in, which is an experiment.
The buildings are all gone. Only a memory transfixed in the minds of the former tenants, as if you could still feel the rubble drifting in the wind. What was promised was new mixed income communities. Though only a fraction of former public housing residents were actually allowed to move back into the new communities. Most were never built, leaving vast expanses of land just vacant.
A lot of places have not even started construction yet. They've still have been empty for more than a decade. That was the centerpiece of the Plan for Transformation, the $1 billion plus plan that set out to remake public housing in this city. Overall, where did people go? That's the big question.
You have to take the time to really find a community that will accept you as a Section 8 recipient with a voucher. I ended up down here at Garfield Park. A lot of times you end up in a community like this. You're gonna see drug dealings every day. You're gonna hear shootings. It's not like you're living in Beverly Hills, you know. At the same time, what can we do? I have 2 boys, 2 girls. My oldest son, his name is Edwin Dorsey.
Growing up is always tough in Chicago, you know. Everybody, all these murders happen, everybody dying, you know. So it's a lot of killings around here, so it's really a crazy neighborhood. Kids getting shot every day, so you get accustomed to it, you know. Any altercation could pop off. It could start from something little, then escalate to so big, and then all kids think in their mind is, go get a gun, you know.
One of the things about these guys that I found very unique is that the brotherhood and the family environment that they have, that they try to create amongst themselves. They got 1 or 2 houses that they can take all the guys in, and they kind of all chip in together, where they all kind of put their money together. They're like, we're all that we have.
Absolutely, I worry. I mean, it's a chance that they take every time they go outside. And we living in a really bad environment where we just need to really change our ways.
Some kids may turn to the streets, you know, try to hustle. Yeah, the money fast, but it's always gonna find a way to catch up with you. You don't know that your enemy right around the corner watching you from the whole situation. You don't know that the police watching too. It's always different circumstances, you know, so keep your head up. Always just second think everything. Well, you gotta watch your back every day. It's the most dangerous job in America.
Does anybody ever sit down and ask them, like, what do you want to do? I'm pretty sure selling drugs is not going to be the first thing out of their mouth. They're just getting money with that. That's not their passion. Somebody's got to be there to say, hey, you can do this. Let me show you this over here. And then you got to want to do it. You got to want to do it.
He has a lot of potential in a job or something opposed to just selling drugs out here and just being caught up in, in this vicious, nasty world that we're living in.
He love money too much and don't know how to let it come to him instead of him gotta go and get it all the time. He think I'm always trying to be his mama when really I'm just being his girlfriend. He don't want to listen. Each time I tell him, he get in trouble right after I had to tell him.
I got a son. I just want to provide from him, so it was just always hard. It's just getting your mind focused. Got to keep your mind straight and what you want to do in life. If you think you could do it, you probably could do it.
Is it tough to live in the city right now?
Yeah, it is. It's tough. And when King get older, I'm trying to move out before he get 5. Move out of Chicago, out of Illinois, period. Too many people getting taken out this world for no reason. Nowhere to raise my son at.
You don't want to just wake up to hearing your best friend getting shot on the news, you know. You don't want to wake up to that every day.
Have you had friends get killed?
Yeah, one of my friends, yeah, recent, just about a month ago. Yeah. Some people get away with some things. Some people go to jail. For every action is reaction. So it's consequences to everything. So you never know. Never really know.
Edwin is at a critical age, no longer in school, and left with few options to provide for his young family. The days can be long in these Chicago streets. Edwin has reached his crossroad. Which way will he go?
I've seen a variety of reasons as to why some kids turn to the streets to sell drugs. It can be as simple as feeding themselves. When you're 14, 15 years old, it's hard to get a job, so this tends to be the fastest, easiest way to get money. A lot of times it's the younger guys who are the ones selling the drugs on the street because the consequences are lower for juveniles. A lot changes when you're convicted of a felony. We call these, I guess, in the legal world, the collateral consequences of felony conviction. 7393, boy. It's really hard to see one of my 17-year-olds get arrested as a young 18-year-old and seeing how their lives have changed and how great the consequences can be for adult cases. I met Edwin about a year ago in custody at the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center. He was really at risk the whole time of being committed to the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice. We always try to prevent incarceration. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. The judge in Edwin's situation was unwilling to give him that third or fourth chance, basically.
Edwin was charged with possession with the intent to distribute narcotics and sentenced to 6 months in a juvenile detention center. He now faces an all too common reality. As a Black man in America, there's nearly an 80% chance that he will return to prison within 5 years after being involved in the federal justice system.
It feels good to be back. You're happy to be out, running these streets.
Feel great, you know. Waiting a little long time, but it's finally here.
Want to see the baby?
Yeah, happy to see the sun, man. I ain't seen them in a minute. Hey! Hello, man. Miss Daddy. Hey. Mwah. You miss your daddy? Daddy miss you. You wanna go to the stove?
He's an adult now, so he gotta carry and conduct himself as an adult. I mean, he gotta be a role model to his son at the end of the day. I can't be. My son was guilty of the crimes that he committed. He did his time. I won't judge him. That's part of the past. I strongly believe you gotta stand behind your children. Just don't turn your back on them, before it's too late. Unfortunately, these younger guys are the ones that are losing their lives. I just want him to take the time, become a father the way that he's supposed to be towards his son, and just become a respectful man in society.
I seen that happen many times. Somebody just come home out of jail, been gone for a couple months or so, come out. It's the circumstances they still in, they still around the same place with the bad negativity, so kind of drags them back into it, They don't got that many opportunities. They got felonies on their background, so trying to do something productive, but end up, going back towards down the wrong road. You ain't gonna achieve what you want to achieve by tomorrow. There's always gonna be distractions. So you just gotta be focused on everything you wanna do. You got a dream, just chase it. Your life doesn't end there.
We're working with guys aged 17 to 25, guys who've been on the street, dropped out of high school, maybe didn't even finish 8th grade, the ones who have records, the ones who nobody wanted. Every other program kicked them out. These are the ones that we're going after because these are the ones that are causing the most ruckus.
Our objective is high school diploma, no new cases, clean drops, a marketable skill. In other words, a new identity. They didn't come to us with 5 minutes worth of trauma. They come to us with 18, 21, 25 years worth of trauma. And they've navigated that trauma the best way they could figure out. So our desire is to say, yo, you count. We see you. You're significant.
We really want them to kind of get unplugged from the streets. And we want to be able to have them get plugged in with a life coach and kind of start to work on doing something different with their life.
I tell them when we first talk to them, you suck as a criminal. You suck as a criminal. Let me just let you know now. That's why you're on parole or probation. That's not perhaps maybe the design you're created to be. Maybe you're designed to start a business. Maybe you're supposed to run this firehouse.
It's not about bringing a kid to a program and being with them for a couple of hours and then sending them back out, but really walking life with them, being in their life to help transform their life.
The language of success, that is Reparation meets opportunity, determination, and have a plan.
You can kind of have an approach of that these guys have had all these hard times in the past. What I've found is that the guys have an incredible hunger to get ahead. I've seen guys go through drug treatment programs and then get union jobs. I've seen guys get their high school diploma at an age when they thought that was completely beyond them and it was never going to happen for them. It's just an incredible experience when you get to be part of a guy doing something for themselves.
I was thinking like, damn, I can't be doing the same thing to put me in the same position that I'm in already. Some had to give, some had to change.
I can't help to think about this quote right here, man. Go out and do something great with your day.
Came across this program, and then that was looking bright for me.
We believe in you, man. That's what we want you to do. We want you to succeed in whatever you want to do, all right? Go out, man, and do something great with your day.
Just like to learn new things, trying to, just learning new things, learning new ways, and just applying them to the real world. It's a lot of stuff that people out here need, such as job training, getting my education through the programs, helps you deal with emotional stress, therapy. Very much thankful. It's a blessing, you know. Decent blessing, yeah. Can't complain.
You know, the guys say to us, you guys are the only men who are with us who don't want nothing from us. Nobody believes that anybody gives a fuck about them. So I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. Because I walked right by you and you knew I needed some help and you didn't do anything. You saw a situation and you didn't come through. The community is tired. I mean, we got elders who say, I stay in my house in the summertime. I am not coming outside because guys are shooting up and down the block, not with some BB guns, with some AK-47s, 50-round clips. So I'm not coming outside. I'm not gonna be the village. We believe in journeying with you. We're gonna journey with you. We'll love you until you can love yourself. You now begin to wear down what was done in the village to you, with the school, with the teacher, with family, with the police.
There's a small number of guys who are actually keeping up the drama, is actually keeping up the violence. And if we can tap into those guys and show them other options and really help them, that's gonna begin to turn the relationship and begin to change the dynamics of how this young man thinks and how he views life.
If you got up and went to the lakefront and watched the sun come up, now the day is yours. That's rare. You're a different dude.
I'm gonna stay focused because I know what I want to do. If you make a wrong decision, it's gonna be a consequence to that action. So I learned that younger. I'm 19, but I learned that at a young age. I learned that at 16, 17. Every action is a reaction, so it's up to you to do it the right thing. I was really supposed to graduate last year, but I made it this year. As long as I get that diploma, and it's something that nobody can never take away from me. So happy that I'm getting it. For the homies who died, I know they watching down on me, knowing I'm doing the right thing, and it's happy for me. But I mean, homies in jail, I know that they could, hopefully they get a chance, you know, get an opportunity like I got, and get their life on track. Everything works out for the best.
This drug dealing life, the consequences will be either you end up in jail or you'll be dead. And it's sad because these are young kids that are dying. But then again, I'm thankful because you gotta go through something in order to come out. And my son has went through a whole lot and he's finally coming out of it.
Graduation is going to be alphabetical order. So folks are going to be in alphabetical order. So it's a whole group of everybody else and other cohorts all together.
Graduation. So successful at that moment, being able to get my mama something that a lot of my family members didn't have. Very proud of myself. Very proud.
My pleasure
to welcome you to the Chicago Grad second graduation. Make some noise.
And so for all the challenges we face, for all the pain we sometimes feel, I am wildly optimistic about where our city's gonna go. The only thing I'm gonna ask is you reach back and bring 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 with you. If we do that, the numbers of this start to turn the city in a very different way in a short amount of time. So congratulations, I couldn't be more proud of you. One step a long journey. You guys make me proud every single day.
You know, I come from poverty, but the road is brighter, so I know I got some potential to do a lot of good things now.
I would just add that potential's always been there. Just having a chance to sort of rise to the surface. And he's not a different person. He has a good heart. All of our guys have good hearts. They just maybe haven't had the chances, the opportunity to support, and honestly, the love. And there's a lot of love in a room like this, and people who believe deeply in what he can accomplish, not just today, but for the next 10 years for the West Side, but also for the city. All right, so proud, so proud. Great job. How you feel? You straight?
Good.
Edwin Dorsey.
I've always told them the sky is the limit. You just gotta have the willingness, the effort, and the faith, and believe in yourself. Ain't nobody gonna do it for you. And hopefully this is just the beginning to a great future.
It's rooms like this that have led the way in reducing Chicago's spiraling murder rate in recent years, with investment into the communities that need it most by leaders within these communities. But more needs to be done to combat Chicago's stark poverty and violence epidemic. Edwin's story embodies the struggle for so many young Black men in Chicago and cities across America today, at the crossroad of success and failure, life and death. It's a city that rose from the ashes to become a global city, once called the city of the century, the city of broad shoulders. So why not here? Why not now? To mobilize a sustainable and equitable city for all, perhaps serving as a model for others to follow. But the biggest questions still remain. Where will people live? Where will they work? And what kind of city will future generations inherit? Because Chicago's story is the American story, written by those searching for a better way of life, and understanding how we got here may be the only path forward.
What y'all think about how strong and resilient we are, right? Like, I mean, I say we are so great. All the trials and errors, you know, the different things that we'll go through, and, you know, we have to deal with a lot. There's a lot against us on a daily basis. As soon as we wake up, like the air and the water is even built to, we're against us, right? The food, everything that you need for nourishment, things of that nature. Spiritual nature contaminated with false doctrine and you know, things of that nature. Like, there's just so much. We really are a strong people. That's all that I have to say. You know, I'm not the type to look at like a sad story or, you know, oh, woe with me, or, you know, this and that. I like to look at things for the way that they are, right? And the way that I see things is that we're just like powerful. We're strong, we're resilient. You know, we've overcome so many different obstacles at so many times all the time. And it's like, it never ceases to amaze me, you know, how strong we are. Me, myself, you know, I've been through quite a few things, you know, and at the same time, I'm still very strong. Thank you, sis. I got one more for you guys. Anybody that needs to leave, I know I'm just doing the watch party, as you guys seen in the title. I think I put in the title, just a watch party. I haven't done one in a while. Haven't had any good internet. There's always a lot of videos that I like to present, and that kind of shows certain things and topics that I think are important to bring up and make us see and remember, and see what's being done against us. Right, sis. Especially looking at Chicago. Oh my gosh, Chi-Town. You talking about downtown? Hold on one second, guys. Okay, yeah, downtown was like my favorite thing to do. Like I used to go to the arcade, like on the weekends. My brother loved Kung Fu, and that was my running buddy. He'd be like, "Come on, sis, let's go downtown to the movie." So we'd go to the movie on a Saturday, go from movie to movie to movie to movie. Like we used to be chilling. I remember going to the drive-in, going on the playground at the drive-in. My mom would go early. We'll play on the playground while she chilling or doing whatever she doing. She'll get little snacks and stuff. Then when the movie started, we come back, watch our little movie. I had a great time growing up. The beach, the parks. Oh my gosh, especially the beaches. We stayed going to the beach as well. Downtown, the beaches. I mean, I can't even tell you about the great things about Chicago, but we're gonna get into this last one. This would be the last one. I have a few, but since I'm able to get some things going now, what I'm going to do is start to be sure to do some watch parties again here and there. I miss doing these, so definitely want to get back into this. So let's get to this and enjoy this, guys.
Night there's sniper fire. It sounds like Beirut, but in fact, it's America, a creature of state, local, and federal government, the product of bad politics, failed policy, and official neglect. It exists unseen except by those who live there, a stone's throw away from some of the most valuable real estate in our nation's third largest city. What's it like here? What's the neighborhood like?
Like a bad neighborhood.
Dangerous?
Yes.
Can you tell when somebody's going to shoot?
Yes. They just grab their gun and just start shooting.
10-1 and 10-1, 116-1.
One time they came over this way, and then they saw this lady, and she said something to them, and then she had a big hole in her head when they killed her.
They shot her.
I don't know what they did.
Did you see her?
Yes.
How often do you hear gunshots?
Too often.
Johnny Shannon is 10 years old. He lives within walking distance of Chicago's Gold Coast, but it's several worlds away. His home is Cabrini Green, a name at once both saintly and sylvan. It is neither.
When I first came here, it reminded me of Vietnam.
It's been called a city within a city, the most notorious public housing project in America. Dennis Davis patrols it for the Chicago police.
Drive straight through.
Built in the 40s and 50s, it was supposed to provide safe, inexpensive, integrated housing for people trying to save money to buy a house. Today, it's 70 acres of no man's land, void of legitimate enterprise, with its own laws and its own language.
Now, this building is called The Rock.
The Rock?
Yeah, The Rock.
Why do you call it The Rock?
It's like the Rock of Gibraltar. It's there, you can't get to it, and it's the strongest thing in Cabrini. There's normally a sentry. He's standing right there in front of 1150 now.
What's he looking for?
Police. They're selling drugs from the lobby. He will see us when we make the turn, and if they're dealing, he'll just walk away into the building. And once they get into the building, that's it. We won't find them.
Cabrini is part of the worst public housing system in the country. So bad that 2 years ago, the federal government threatened to take it over. The Chicago Housing Authority doesn't even know who lives in its buildings, but 100,000 people are waiting to get in. The only structure is provided by the gangs, who mark their turf with spray paint and set up sniper posts in high-rise buildings. The working poor Cabrini was designed for have long since fled. leaving the desperate
Okay, hold on real quick.
alongside the help.
I don't know what's going on in this chat now. DJ, what we're not going to do is harass the women. I don't care if she's wrong or right at this moment. If she has not cursed you out or called you out of your name, I would suggest you excuse whatever you think she said rude and leave it alone, brother. That's my suggestion right now, please. I don't like the discourse, any of that funny, weird stuff in my chat. We ain't gonna do that. We don't do that over here. Like, we don't do it at all. I'm so serious, brother, because we ain't gonna have it. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. Whatever it is, drop it right this moment. Please do not address the lady again, and we're done with it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Show some respect to what I asked. Thank you.
Helpless.
And I don't give a damn how hard you try to teach your kids to walk a straight line. So gangbangers are the role model for these children in this neighborhood.
60% of the households here are headed by single women. Patricia Welch is one of them, trying to raise 3 boys. 2/3 of Cabrini's residents are children. What's it like living here?
Hell,
Why hell?
because you don't know if a bullet gonna come through your window. You don't know why you're going to the store, if you're gonna be shot at, or your children be hurt in any kind of way.
When was the last time there was shooting here?
Well, my building last night.
Do you think your mother worries about you living here?
Yes,
Why?
because when you go outside, there's bad things happening out there.
What's the closest you've ever come to getting hurt by the gangbangers?
Well, one time I was playing in the playground, they just started shooting back and forth.
What do you do when you hear shooting?
I run.
We're in a battle. We're in a battle with the gangs for those youngsters.
Bob Martin heads the Chicago Intervention Network, a city agency that works with gangs.
We have what we call marginal youth, or what some gang members call trophies.
Why trophies?
They are children that are born out of wedlock, that the fathers oftentimes brag about how many youngsters they have, how many sons they have. And the code word for son is trophy. That is the next wave of gang members coming up. And when you hear gang members say, "You'll never stop the gangs," you can't stop us. We are a nation. That's what they're referring to.
When you think of Cabrini, you can look right out my window and see it. It's only 6 blocks, but it's a cancer that can spread into every neighborhood in the city of Chicago.
Cabrini first gained notoriety in 1981, when then Chicago Mayor Jane Byrne briefly took an apartment there.
I'm going to straighten out project living in this city, because by allowing it, we can harm the whole city, and I'm not going to have it.
By most accounts, Byrne spent 1 or 2 days a week there for 6 months, and then Cabrini once again fell into neglect. Today, the Housing Authority is $30 million in debt. The building codes are not being enforced, and the elevators, when they work, are called the most dangerous form of public transportation in Chicago.
Do the gangs control the elevators?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they can control them. At one time, they, as a matter of fact, they were hiding up here. And if a young lady got on the elevator, they would jump down and, do what they wanted to do to her. They used to hide guns up there.
This is 11.
That's 11?
Right.
Okay.
It's pretty dark out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see, that's another thing about these elevators, because you never know what's going to happen when the door opens.
Just watch my back.
Where'd he get shot?
Well, he probably got shot somewhere around here.
Last year, 200 people were shot or stabbed in Cabrini. 8 violent crimes for every 100 people.
How long ago did he get shot?
Oh, just a real short time ago. He was shot by some fellows across the way here as he crossed the field.
Did you know this kid?
Oh, yeah, for about 4 years.
In 5 years, brother Bill Tomes has seen 65 of his friends shot or stabbed. He's an emissary from the Archbishop of Chicago, a peacekeeping force of 1 who roams Cabrini at night, helping women and children negotiate the free fire zones.
Are you trying to save souls here?
No, we're trying to show God's love for people.
You're trying to keep people alive.
Oh, I think we're trying to keep people alive. Yeah.
Those are pretty low expectations.
Oh, I don't know. Keep somebody alive.
Y'all be cool, man. Y'all be careful.
Most of the kids, for example, have been shot. Almost all of them have been shot.
Yeah, it's my brother. They killed my brother.
Is sudden violent death just sort of accepted here, something that happens?
Well, it's expected to happen in this kind of environment, and you never know when it's going to. It could be right now.
In fact, it was 15 minutes later. Brother Bill and the paramedics were called to attend to a stabbing victim, but they failed to achieve their modest goal.
Very serious. Stay out of the way. Stay out of the way. We're gonna get out of here.
I want to know. I want to know. My God.
Her son died in the elevator. Who controls this area? Does the police control it?
Yeah, we control it. Yes.
You're serious?
I'm serious.
I believe the gangs are in control of Cabrini. And anytime they nickname the plaza area as a shooting gallery, then I don't think the police or CHA management is in control of the property.
That assessment comes not from some alderman or candidate running for local office, but from the latest director of the Chicago Housing Authority, Vincent Lane. We've talked to residents at different housing projects in Chicago who describe the buildings they live in or the projects that they live in as the graveyard, the DMZ, death row, Beirut.
That's right.
Accurate descriptions?
Accurate descriptions. With the one exception today, and that's at a building, 2417 West Adams.
When I got in here, I was so thrilled about the apartment. 2 bathrooms, 4 big bedrooms, roomy. I could fix it up like a home, you know.
When Evelyn Walker first moved to 2417 West Adams, she thought she'd died and gone to heaven. But that was before she found out it was called the graveyard, and with good reason.
And I mean, a lot of bullets come in. I'm not talking about 1 or 2 bullets.
Into the apartment.
It was attacked from every angle. One day it might be the back. Next day it might be the front. Sometimes it'd be from back and front.
What did you do to try and protect yourself?
Well, we stopped eating at the dining room table, for one thing. We got a big closet in the back. We stayed in that closet basically when shooting would occur. My children were actually trained like maybe men would be in the service to take cover, hit the floor.
Using it at 4 o'clock in the morning. I just came over.
That was before Vince Lane and the Chicago Housing Authority announced a plan to take the projects back from the gangs, with police sweeps, security gates, and ID checks. The first step was to get rid of the squatters. Federal agents and Chicago police forcibly removed anyone who wasn't on the Housing Authority's list.
Who's Deion Wilson?
That's me.
Who's Calvin Gibson?
That's me. You want to go check the school?
It's really no different than when you and I were in school, where 2 or 3 bullies controlled the whole classroom. I proposed to turn that around. I want to give the residents the support so that they can throw the bullies out.
You've got security people all over the building now.
Well, that's for now. That's for now. But what about when security leaves?
Do you think security's going to leave?
I think security is going to leave eventually.
I admire your confidence, but I think you need to note that you are the 8th person to have this job in the last 5 years.
There were a lot of employees when I got here said I wouldn't last 3 months.
How long have you been here?
6 months.
That was in December, and Vince Lane is still there. But there are some, including the Urban League and the Mayor's Advisory Council, who believe the solution to high-rise ghettos like Cabrini Green may be to level them. The only hope for kids like Johnny Shannon, escape. What are you going to do if the gangbangers come up to you and say, we want you to join?
I'll tell them no.
What if they insist?
I'll still tell them no. I won't join.
Would you like to live somewhere else?
Yes.
Where would you like to live?
In Beverly Hills.
In Beverly Hills. Why in Beverly Hills?
Because it's not like no violence.
There are kids that are savable in the Cabrini Green area who want to get out of the gangs, but they say, what do I do? Where do I go? You got to have a dream to turn your life around, to shoot for something. How are you going to dream if you haven't seen anything?
Just had a gang fight between members of the 500 West Oak building and the 11 and 17.
Now, a Chicago story. For many years, officials there, like their counterparts all over the country, have been trying to curb violence and crime in public housing projects. Elizabeth Brackett reports on their latest attempt.
Senque Selvi has a short walk to school every morning. But as Senque winds his way through the tall buildings of the Cabrini Green housing project, he faces more than most 10-year-olds do on their way to school.
I gotta walk down the long way instead of walking the short way, because you never know, if somebody can shoot you with a bullet, and a bullet don't got no eye. I know this boy who got shot, who went to Jenner, 2 more boys, I think, Anthony Felton and Roosevelt. I don't know his last name, but Laquita Ellis got shot too. It's like you gotta be careful to walk to school in Cabrini Green.
Last fall, Senque lost another classmate to a sniper's bullet. 7-year-old Dontrell Davis was shot in the head as he walked hand in hand with his mother across the parking lot from his building to Jenner School. Senque's mother and other mothers at Cabrini now shudder when they send their children off to school.
Yeah, I pray every morning, before they get ready to go to school, that we get on our knees and we pray.
Dontrell was the 3rd Jenner grade school student killed by gunfire this year. His death quickly became a symbol of the escalating urban violence that cities seem to be unable to control. Chicago Mayor Richard Daley.
What we see is, unfortunately, the wanton violence, the whole total disregard of human life by gang and drug dealers. And it's almost to be declaring a war. That's where we are, really, declaring a war against the gang dealers and drug dealers and gang bangers in our city and our nation. We have to. We have a war here. And we have to go after them the same way they go after innocent people.
Daley and Chicago Housing Authority Chief Vince Lane vowed to take back Cabrini Green from the shooters, the snipers, and the gangs. 1 week after Dontrell Davis's death, the housing project was inundated with hundreds of police officers, city workers, and construction crews. Entrances to all buildings were secured and locked. Residents now have to walk through metal detectors and show IDs to get into previously unlocked buildings.
Before, this building was open 24 hours, 7 days a week. Anybody could come in here, drive up, walk off the sidewalk, come in here, get in the elevator, do anything they wanted. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Now it's more secure.
That's the key. You have to have security.
Controlling violence in public housing is a problem plaguing cities across the country. But a recent federal report called Chicago's crime problems the worst in the nation. The concentration of high-density high-rises plus well-organized gangs means gangs can virtually control the projects here. Sick of the killing and the drugs, many residents welcomed the new security measures.
Considering how bad it's been over here, in a way I kind of understand why they got so many police over here and whatnot. Try to straighten out things, straighten buildings out, keep all the trouble, keep all the drugs and stuff out.
And when the police all leave, do you think it will be different?
Yeah, I think we will. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but hopefully it'll be safe around here for a pretty long time.
There have been many efforts to curb the violence in the 70-acre Cabrini Green project that sits just to the west of Chicago's Gold Coast and only 2 miles from downtown. Mayor Jane Byrne moved into Cabrini Green in 1981 in an effort to focus attention on the security needs at the project. The latest effort is the biggest. The city will spend $500,000 to seal off 4 buildings, conduct apartment-by-apartment security sweeps in the remaining 30 buildings, and expand social services. Vince Lane told Cabrini residents this time they too must get involved.
You all have had to duck and dodge bullets long enough. I don't want to go to any more funerals for babies. I don't want to go to any more funerals for anybody. Not when they're funerals because someone has been killed in a violent manner. You all have to take advantage of the moment. Come out of your apartments, start working with each other, with the organizations that service Cabrini, and let's throw the bad guys out. And some of those bad guys, you know as well as I do, are your friends and relatives.
On the street, there was no doubt that the heat was on. On the day of the security sweep, 15 police officers went after these young men after a report that a gun had been found nearby.
Let me tell you something. The minute you leave here, you go straight over to that ID center and get processed, okay? If I see you again out here and you ain't got processed, I'm gonna lock you up. And I gotta get the lease out the house. You need that.
Some residents complained that the metal detectors and constant checks made them feel more like they were in prison than at home.
I think it's kind of overdone, you know. I mean, it's all well and done, but they secure the building and searching the vacant apartment, but, you know, it's ridiculous being searched coming in and coming out.
How many times have you been searched today?
About 4 times. Just trying to walk with my mother while she getting her identification and just trying to get in the building and get something to eat for lunch. You know, it's just ridiculous. And I know I couldn't slip nothing in and out that quick.
You can't even go in your own building without showing the ID of somebody coming to sign you in. South Africa somewhere, like you're in a concentration camp.
Community activist Marion Stamps has been working with Cabrini's children for over 20 years. She says the new security measures are not the way to go.
You have to see the police in 3 and 4 buses and all the cars. I mean, the buses look like tanks, right? They came in our community like they was going to Desert Storm. That's no way to treat us. They treating us like everybody in this community killed that baby. And that's no way to treat us.
The crackdown has brought complaints. The American Civil Liberties Union has sued the Housing Authority, saying security sweeps violate tenants' rights to be free from unreasonable search and seizure and their right to privacy.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Miss Dixon. Okay, but number one, I don't have no drugs. This is the drug-free house, okay? Okay. So when you come in here, I don't want my house all rumbled up and tore up and disarranged.
But police official Sherwood Williams, who heads up the division charged with securing Cabrini, says the ACLU lawsuit prevents police from being as effective as they could be.
Police can't go into these occupied apartments and search. That'd be a violation of the rights. Even with the emergency inspections conducted by CHA management team, they only can make a cursory type of observations in the apartments. So if I'm a gangbanger and I know the police's hands is tied as far as coming in occupied apartments and so forth, we can take them guns and hide them in drawers and closets and so forth.
These are the young men who are the targets of the massive effort by the police and the Housing Authority. But now even the gang leaders say the killing must stop. These men of the Cobra Nation were out putting up flyers calling for an end to the drugs and the guns. They say even before Dontrell Davis's death, gang leaders had come together and called for a truce. Dave Mack says after burying 4 brothers, he knew it was time to stop.
It was destroying. I mean, you could look at the crime. It was black killing black. I'm telling you, if you really look at it, you know what I'm saying, it wasn't no white person coming over here killing us. You know what I'm saying, we was killing our own people, and it's time to stop. You know what I'm saying?
How did you get people together who had been shooting each other?
You know, it was just, you know, but it was just time for to unite. You know what I'm saying? They wanted to cause a damn trail. You know, this something that's supposed to be in focus. we realized that we were destroying our nationality from our future youth. You know, we want to get that to them because we feel as though, you know, the young brothers and sisters growing up, you know, deserve to, you know, to have more than what we had. And you know, we're trying to get this to them.
Crime has dropped at Cabrini Green since Dontrell Davis's death. There were no murders and only 2 shootings in the 3 weeks after the security sweeps began. The head of the Chicago Police Department, Matthew Rodriguez, says it is more likely that it was the new security measures, not a gang truce, that calmed the projects.
If they choose to take credit for that, that's up to the gangs. My evaluation of a truce would be quite a distance in the future, and basically, you know, I don't put a whole lot of stock in it. At the same time, in this city, back in the 1920s, we saw other organized criminal activity, other criminal gangs who also purportedly entered into truces, and the truce never seemed to be long-standing. So, based on history, there is nothing for me to take a great comfort from.
No matter what has made the difference, security efforts or a gang truce, Sanque Salvi says it is not quite as scary to walk to school now. But Sanque and his classmates, like most everyone at Cabrini, wonder if it will last.
I think it'll get better, like, if they like they have police on the street 24 hours a day, like they see any gang members walking down the street, they can like tell them to go somewhere else. If they don't, they could arrest them.
I don't think this neighborhood is going to get better. I think afterwards, when they get finished with the buildings and everything, fixing them around, getting all the cocaine and drug pushers out, it's going to be the same way again. And that people are going to start doing it over again. And then the people, police and everything are not going to do nothing about it. They're just going to keep letting it happen. And this neighborhood is going to stay the same.
The effort to make life safer for Cabrini's children has been massive. But poverty is still the basic, intractable problem here. The shooting at Cabrini may have stopped for the moment, but at home, Sanque Salvi must still deal with a bleak, roach-infested apartment. There is little furniture, few clothes, no books. Afraid of the violence outside, his 28-year-old mother rarely leaves her apartment. The television is her main contact with the outside world. Vince Lane says children like Sanque Salvi may survive here, but they will not thrive unless basic changes are made in public housing.
As long as we sit here with 90% of the residents on welfare, huddled in these tiny boundaries, we're going to have problems.
Solving those basic structural problems will take a lot longer than installing metal detectors and running security sweeps. But Vince Lane says Chicago has begun to try. He says the legacy of Dontrell Davis demands no less.
Finally tonight, essayist Clarence Page of the Chicago Tribune offers some ideas about a Chicago housing project called Cabrini Green.
Architecture is a big deal in Chicago. You can tell by our skyline. Architectural giants like Louis Sullivan, Frank Lloyd Wright, and Mies van der Rohe planted themselves on this prairie and built their own mountains. Some others built their own mistakes, like this one, the Cabrini Green Public Housing Complex. In many ways, a high-rise ghetto plagued with crime, joblessness, fear, and despair.
You can't blame all of Cabrini Green's problems on the architecture, of course, but this place did teach urban planners an important lesson the hard way. High-rise buildings might work for the elderly, but they don't work for large families. We all make mistakes. Unfortunately, in this case, a lot of large families with small children have to live with the consequences.
When gang-related gunfire killed 3 children here in less than a year, the city seemed to be shaken for a change out of its usual snooze. Suddenly, everyone wanted to do something. But what? St. Louis used dynamite to blow up its high-rise ghetto, Pruitt-Igoe, in 1972. A lot of Chicagoans would like to do that to Cabrini Green. although that possibility frightens Cabrini Green residents. This is our home, they say. Where will we live? Downtown, at the newspaper where I work, the editors came up with an unusual idea, an architecture contest to redesign Cabrini Green. It was at best an unusual idea, maybe even a wacky idea. But a similar contest in 1922 produced Tribune Tower, the newspaper's landmark neo-Gothic headquarters, with its flying buttresses, its bell tower, and its gargoyles. Just the thing to keep evil spirits out of our journalism. This time would be different. This time there would be no prize money or construction guarantee. The ideas would be their own reward. The question was, would anyone care? Someone did. More than 300 entries came in from around the world. There were traditionalists who reinvented Cabrini Green as a classic suburban-style housing development. There were modernists who recreated Cabrini Green as a garden of giant bulb-shaped structures and igloos, like something out of a Star Trek movie. There were deconstructionists who tried to break all the rules, rounding off corners, squaring circles, and slashing across it at every odd angle imaginable. Interesting, innovative, but would you want to live here? No, said the postmodernists. The retro crowd turned back the clock to something familiar enough to warm an old city dweller's heart, classic Chicago-style neighborhood flats. Others were content to simply make a statement and nothing more. This one, with handguns floating ominously outside the window of a child with a blood-red doll, speaks powerfully, like a rap tune. A modest yet painfully sincere effort turns out to have been submitted by two Cabrini Green residents, young girls aged 12 and 13. Among their recommendations, stop signs at an intersection because many children have been struck by cars here. This place, a very bad drug building. They ask that somebody build townhouses on this site. It's a call for action mixed poignantly with a cry for help. The judges, who included one Cabrini Green resident, asked other residents what they wanted. Their answers were not fancy or exotic. They wanted what most other Americans want, they said, a comfortable home and a neighborhood that works.
We did not have showers. We did not have enclosed closets and things. We did not have ceiling fans,
What do you think your neighbors need more than anything else?
To cooperate, so the buildings could stay clean instead of filthy all the time.
What would you tell people who don't know Cabrini Green if you had a chance?
Come in with a positive attitude and you will find that Cabrini Green will be a very enjoyable place.
It was that kind of vision in the end, basic old-fashioned notions of home and neighborhood, that captured the judges' hearts too. 3 winners were chosen. This one came from Fargo, North Dakota, of all places. Still, it scored big. Like the other 2, it reconnected the projects with the nearby neighborhood, making Cabrini Green seem more like a neighborhood too. This winner, by a Chicago team, took that idea a step further by reintegrating stores, jobs, and middle-class families into Cabrini's community. This winner, by a Belgian designer who had never been to Chicago, takes a bold step ahead into the past. Playfully, it reimagines the boxy and sterile regimentation into a medieval-style village, complete with a green forest running through it like a river. Once you have seen what it could be, Cabrini Green doesn't look so hopeless. Its problems don't look so impossible to solve if only we put our minds to it and put our ideas to work with action. The future of our cities rests on our ability to reclaim neighborhoods like this. A pioneer Chicago architect once said, "Make no small plans." Perhaps today we should add, "Seek no small remedies." I'm Clarence Page.
They're finally tearing down Cabrini Green. For decades, the red and white tenements near downtown Chicago have been a blot on the skyline, the nation's most infamous public housing project, synonymous with gangs, drugs, misery, and murder. And Cabrini Green is just the beginning. The plan is to replace all of Chicago's projects with beautiful new mixed income developments. That means rich and poor living side by side. So what do you get when you take the country's most disadvantaged families, add in some young professionals, and build them a brand new neighborhood? Chicago is finding out. The experiment is already underway. It started with a bang and a round of applause. All over Chicago, they're tearing down the cinder block dinosaurs known here simply as the projects. They've been a disaster, with generations of children raised in the squalor, but no more. By the end of 2009, all 53 of Chicago's public housing high-rises will be gone. It's the largest demolition of public housing in the nation's history. It will uproot some 40,000 people, many of whom have never lived anywhere else but public housing. People like Larry Sargent. What'd you think when you heard that the city was going to tear down your building?
I was glad.
But you were to lose your home.
I'd rather sleep on a cardboard box in the streets rather than keep going through what I was going through.
In Cabrini Green?
Yes, a child of 12 and 11 years old with a gun, you don't know where you might get it from.
Larry Sargent grew up in Cabrini Green, but when he took on sole custody of his baby son, he knew he had to break the cycle and get out. He never imagined that out might mean this, a brand new $70 million development just 100 yards from Cabrini Green. It's called Northtown Village, 261 condos and townhomes that represent one of the most daring concepts in public housing today. 79 families will have the chance to move out of Cabrini Green and move in here next to someone who bought one of these brand new homes at market rate. A 3-bedroom, top-of-the-line townhome like that costs nearly $500,000. The identical unit next door could be reserved for a Cabrini Green family whose rent is subsidized by the government. The project started 2 years ago with a complex mix of public and private funding. The man on the ground was Peter Holston, an idealistic developer selling this vision of gentrification with a twist.
So here's someone coming in and buying a $500,000 townhome, and we're telling him in the sales trailer, or her, that you will be living, the townhome next to you, which is no different than yours, is going to have a Cabrini Green family in it.
Basically, someone who's gotten it for free.
Basically, yeah. And these people are not turning away. They're buying them.
Mark and Amanda Thomas.
Do you hear this? Like they
Like a bad man.
I'm sorry, guys. I wasn't gonna stop it. I was just gonna let it be a watch party. But I gotta say this: when have these people ever been so damn kind? Oh yeah, it's just gonna be free. You lying animal. You know HUD housing is Indian housing, right? So with the HUD housing that they get, this is why they wanted to participate. Oh yeah, we'll have a few of these people here. With that HUD housing, they can get tapped into that Indian trust and the Indian funding for the housing for Indians. So yeah, they needed them there. They needed a few of them there to help boost them with some income in them properties. No, don't think they did them no big favors. Oh, don't think they did it out the kindness of their damn heart. They broke that shit down, moved them projects out because they couldn't make no more off of them. They built them condos, as they said, they're getting money from the dumb citizens, the Slavs that can afford to get in there. And then they turn around and put you in there and misappropriately take your funds, and they're getting paid for it through the government for the reservation. It's yet another townhouse reservation. How fucking kind. Excuse my language. Let's go.
Dangerous?
Yes.
Can you tell?
You've been like watching out your door and wondering who's next door. For all the time you've been in public housing, you might not want to go be no good neighbor. Am I saying that you're going to go out there and set up barbecue grills with the folks next door? Not necessarily so.
We're going to have a bunch of social events, and we're going to push the concept of building a community.
Sherry Wade was desperate for a safer community.
To get taken advantage of. They're waiting to get
Banana Republic. So
finding buyers was easy. The hard sell was convincing public housing residents to apply. Peter Holston found that out when he made his pitch to a skeptical crowd at this town hall meeting at Cabrini Green.
We have 2 parks in the unit. One park will have a tot lot, and the other park will have like a splash fountain.
Cabrini residents, already angry about being pushed out, thought Peter Holston's offer sounded too good to be true.
Where are the units that are ready right now?
These people are amazed. They're waiting to get taken advantage of. They're waiting to get screwed. They're waiting to like something go wrong.
So they're sitting there the whole time saying, what's the catch?
Exactly. Exactly.
And the catch is?
There isn't any. The catch is follow the building rules and enjoy yourself in a wonderful brand new home.
But for many coming from the chaos of Cabrini Green, the building rules are barrier enough. On top of the obvious, no drugs, no loitering, no loud music, there's perhaps the hardest expectation of all, that they fit in with their wealthy neighbors. For Larry Sargent, it all seemed overwhelming. Did you think you had a shot?
Not really. You know, the way it was described as mixed incomes and, you know, there's going to be condominiums and townhouses and coach houses. I'm like, I'll just check it out, you know.
But to get into Northtown Village, Larry Sargent and the other applicants would have to pass a screening process so tough that many people simply dropped out. There's a home inspection, a criminal background check, and mandatory drug tests.
Let's just say there's some addiction issues or violence issues or something like that. You're going to have to fix it.
At the time, Candace Howell was a vice president at Peter Holston's development company. She was in charge of the screening process.
We're looking for things, red flags like criminal behavior against property, criminal behavior against people, guns, drugs, convictions. Because we're not miracle workers.
With that in mind, you might think Larry Sargent's past would disqualify him from landing a spot at the new development. He spent his youth trying to escape all that was wrong with Cabrini Green, joining the Army at 17 to get away. But after 6 years, he ended up right back where he started and spent the last 15 years struggling with drug addiction. But when Northtown Village held its first orientation meeting, Larry Sargent was one of the first to arrive.
Our role, our goal is to try to identify the things that's going to stop you from succeeding and help you move through those things, right?
Candace Howell made it clear from day one, Northtown Village would be nothing like Cabrini Green. She literally gave lessons on how to get along there.
You get good neighbor training. How do I go out there and be a good neighbor? You know, I mean, maybe some people don't need to know how to do that, but when you've been like watching out your door and wondering who's next door, you know, for all the time you've been in public housing, you might not want to go be no good neighbor. Am I saying that you're going to go out there and set up barbecue grills with the folks next door? Not necessarily so.
We're going to have a bunch of social events, and we're going to push it, push the concept of building a community.
Sherry Wade was desperate for a safer community. A run of bad luck landed her at Cabrini Green 8 years ago. For her two youngest children, Travis, 12, and Jamila, 9, the projects have been a prison. To keep them safe, Wade says, she keeps them indoors.
Kids are supposed to go outside and play and ride bikes, and mine don't do that.
So the ones who grew up in the project don't even know how to ride a bicycle?
No, they don't.
Larry Sargent and Sherry Wade both made it to the next stage of the application process, which included attending a meeting with some of the buyers.
We might have white neighbors on the 3rd floor, and I live on the 2nd floor, and if they come out and see my children, I want them to know that if they speak, that you speak back.
About them already. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to be the residents that go, you know, like, don't speak to me. You know?
Yeah, we've already spoken.
Wade seemed a shoo-in.
This is going to be huge.
But her application hit a snag. Her on-again, off-again husband wouldn't pass the drug test, and she knew it. So she found herself in an incredible position. Her husband on one hand, a brand new home on the other, and Candace Howell in the middle. Can you make exceptions in a case like that?
Make exceptions for Sherry and then bring in the person next time that had a serious criminal background. They're difficult choices to make.
Sherry Wade saw the writing on the wall and made a wrenching choice. She and her children would leave her husband behind.
I couldn't keep having it happen to the whole family. It wasn't just affecting him, it affected the whole house.
Larry Sargent was determined not to let drugs stand in his way either. He goes regularly for counseling at the VA hospital now, a commitment that helped win him a spot at Northtown Village. He packed up his things, packed up his son, and left Cabrini Green for the last time. Then, just a 5-minute walk away, he began a new life, the sudden sovereign of a brand new 2-bedroom apartment.
It's your bedroom.
With a bird's eye view.
Yep, just sit right here and just watch it happen. So it was, told years ago that one day all these projects are gonna be gone. And I just never thought that it'd happen. But it has.
But not everyone will be lucky enough to live in a place like Northtown Village. So far, 36 high-rises are gone. But aside from Northtown Village, construction of new replacement housing has barely begun. And even when it's done, there will be 14,000 fewer public housing apartments than when the demolition began. Peter Holston says it's the biggest hitch in the city's plans.
What's going to happen to all those other families who fall through the cracks?
Well, hopefully they won't fall through the cracks, but you're right. I mean, there is a huge need. In Cabrini alone, I believe there are several thousand families left. It's going to be tight. It's going to be really tight.
This is a crisis. Mixed income isn't the answer. It's not going to accommodate. It's a fraction of the need.
The city's been trying to help others find homes outside public housing with mixed results. Some resentment has been directed at Northtown Village. There's been vandalism and a couple of break-ins. But mostly the people who live at Northtown Village are focused on settling in.
Our next door neighbor moved in about 2 weeks ago with her couple girls, and they're great.
The Tomlinsons say they hope their presence here makes a difference.
There's been this cycle of isolation that's gone on for, 30, 40 years, whatever it is. And my hope is that this breaks that cycle. In 20 years from now, I think everybody will be happy we did this.
Larry Sargent is glad he did it, as we saw when we went to visit him several months after he moved in. He's been working as a maintenance man for the Holston Group.
Look at this.
And for the first time, he's proud to call his apartment home. Nice things on the wall.
Oh yeah, I got them from the dollar store. Most everything in here is from the dollar store.
It's still a struggle every day, he says, but he hopes the move will give his son the chance he never had.
I give him everything I got, so he don't have to be raised like I was. He'll get a chance to see another part of life at a young age. Hopefully he can take it and go from there, and don't fall into no snake pit like I did.
Sherry Wade still works hard to make ends meet, but says she's already noticed a change in her children and in herself.
We used to go over people's houses to spend the night. Now they want to come home. And I like that.
And as a mother, how does that make you feel?
Like I'm walking in the right direction.
I hope that you guys enjoy our little watch party. Since I am able to do a little bit more with the internet now, we'll try and do one here and there. I do like to be all over the place sometimes. Don't want to talk about the same thing all of the time, but definitely want to keep a focus on everything being about the same thing, us, right? I experienced a lot growing up in Chicago. Like I said, I still loved it. I had a lot of awesome things, great memories, some horrible things too, being a victim of gun violence as well at 10 years old was not an easy thing to go through. But I'm strong, I'm resilient like a lot of children. As you guys see, a lot of kids never even made it out of that. Some children were shot and just, nothing. Nothing else. That was it. That was the end of their life for their mom, for them. You heard the one guy talking about 4 of his brothers. He lost 4 brothers. Okay. Y'all know how strong we are? Yeah. Yes, brother. Definitely. Yes. I got shot 38, 10 years old, 38 to the head. Yep. And stood strong. Didn't fall, didn't pass out, didn't fall down. Like literally nothing. Right in front of the church. Ran right inside the church like the rest of the kids did. Like, yeah. So yeah, we strong. We're very resilient. You know, we go through a lot of things and we overcome. You know, we the shit. All right, guys. This was a beautiful bill just to look at our people, everything that we go through. As I said, and we still stand strong. You know, I'm so proud of us regardless. And I'm so proud of the ones that are making differences and changes in their life to make improvements to put a stop to this shit. We ain't got to, keep letting these people do this. Don't feel sorry. I'm good, brother. I'm so, I take that as, what do you call it? Honor or a badge, right? I learned a lot. I grew a lot. I was always an enlightened child. I was enlightened when I was like 6 and 7. Oh my gosh. I'm telling you, I used to see stuff. I would have certain dreams. I would see numbers, tell my grandma the number. Next thing you know, she go play, she done hit some big money. Like weird stuff like that. I don't know if it's weird, but those are the type of things I've always done. I've always been insightful, tuned in. When I had my accident, having like I guess a near-death experience, and certain things I went through at that time, even though I didn't fall out, I still had a spiritual experience that was, I don't know if I'll get into that and tell you guys about it one day, if I choose to. That's real private, but either way, I've talked about it a little bit before. But it's given me a lot of insight into a lot of things, So we grow from certain experiences we go through, and a lot of times they can make you grow in certain areas that you're not even aware of. Certain enlightenment you get, so on and so forth. So yeah. That's about it, guys. It's a Thursday. I don't know why I keep feeling like the weekend. My daughter's like, "Mommy, it's Thursday." I'm like, "Oh," so yeah, it's Thursday. So tomorrow's the weekend, and we should be able to do something real good tomorrow. Hopefully tomorrow morning. I'm supposed to be going out with my baby. Actually, I forgot. I'm going out in the morning, but maybe tomorrow afternoon or evening, I'm gonna try to get with the brothers and see what they're doing, so we could do us a nice build. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you. I appreciate you guys so much. We can do a good build tomorrow on some things that, we were building on yesterday, so we can keep y'all edified in the right places. I definitely, like us to keep our minds light when it comes to certain things as well, So, yeah. Yeah, you're right about that. Really enjoyed watching the party. Yes, I'm glad you were able to enjoy it, brother. And we were here to, together. We had a nice little crowd in here today. The chat got up to, I think I seen like 70 people in the chat at one time. So yeah, you guys showed out today. Everybody was in tune, and it was perfect. Y'all gave me so much love and appreciation in the chat. It was wonderful to be able to chat with to be able to chat while the video was playing, everybody interacting, speaking their mind, energy being great as it always is. I know that's right, Sky. Hi, sis. Peace and love, babe. Yep, it was a good one. Okay, brother said, and another one. Okay, so yes, guys, we got to definitely do that. Grand Elevations. Oh, you're going to have to run it back with Sky. We just finished, but it was fire, brother. Went over a lot of information pertaining to, the war against us, basically, and how strong and resilient we are. How we definitely are the most powerful things around. Like, for real, we so fire. It's crazy. We just, man, that's why everything go against us. But we cannot be destroyed, okay? Peace, love, and bliss until next time, my loves.